This is one of these gospel lessons that if you're just reading the Bible through by yourself, you could easily hit and read the whole thing through, understand it, and just be left with a giant question mark of like, why are we talking about like manners at a wedding banquet, right? And if all you get is like a Miss Manners lesson from Jesus, you've missed the point of what's going on here. Okay, they clue you in a little bit at the beginning, which is that he has gone to the lead Pharisee's house, the sort of leader of the leaders of the religious community. This is like going to the bishop's house. And he's sitting there and he's watching this banquet happen. And as he watches it, he decides he's going to tell a parable to folks. And in this parable, you get an outline of basically what not to do, right? Don't go ahead and sit at the highest place because then you might get moved down. And then he gives and then as you continue on, he says what to do. Go sit at the lowest place because you might get moved up, right? Then you have this next paragraph, which is this whole idea where he then turns to the host. Okay, he's not talking to the crowd, he's talking to the host. He says, listen, when you invite people, remember this is the head Pharisee because he's the host. When you, the leader of the leaders of the religious groups, when you invite people, don't just invite your brothers and your sisters and your friends and your rich neighbors, because it's likely they'll repay you, right? You're going to give them a great meal. They'll invite you back. It's a polite thing to do, right? Invite the poor, the crippled, the lame. Invite all the people that aren't the right sort of folks who can't pay you back, because that's what we do. We help those who are hungry by feeding them. We don't feed the full in hope of getting something back. What Jesus is really getting at is he's outlining a basic understanding of leadership and Christian leadership. He gives you an analogy, the first part, of what bad leadership looks like. Then he explains how there's a difference between bad leadership and good leadership. But he doesn't stop there. The reason he pulls the Pharisees aside is because he then explains to them the difference between good leadership and good Christian leadership. And there is a difference. So let's walk through each one of those three. So the first part, he talks about a person who shows up and he sits at the top of the wedding banquet and is like, ha ha, I'm clearly the most important person here, so I'm just going to sit down right here. Okay? And then has to be asked by the host to go sit at a lower seat. And it's embarrassing for everyone. Trust me, I've mentored pastors, and one of the things I teach young pastors when I'm mentoring them is, all right, have you ever gone to a wedding reception? Have you ever gone to a wedding reception as the clergy person? Because I'm going to tell you right now, 99% of the time, when you get invited, they will give you no other information than like location, time, and maybe what you're getting fed. They will not tell you where you're supposed to sit. And so as a clergy person, you're like, where am I supposed to sit? Because in some families, they're going to want you at the head table because they're like, look, this is our pastor. For most families, they want you somewhere out there. And for some of them, they might have an assigned seat for you, but goodness knows they're not going to tell you this. And so it's one of the most awkward things that pastors go through. And the worst mistake you can make is to go sit at the head table. Because if you're not meant to be there, what happens next is going to be the town gossip in your little town for the next 20 years, right? Because someone's going to have to be like, hey, that's for the mother-in-law. Can you please get back to table 7, back by the bathroom? Okay? And you don't want that. In a more serious note, is talking about bad leadership. Bad leadership is when you come in and you make the assumption that you know everything. Right? When you walk in and you're like, all right, folks, I know what problems you all have. I don't know your names yet, but I know what your problems are. And I'm the smartest person on everything in this room. We've all met that leader, right? Right? They're the smartest on everything. They don't even know what education you have, what experience you have, what wisdom you come with, what your hobbies are, but they know they're better at all of it than you. Right? You all probably experienced this in business or at home or in any number of settings, right? See, a bad leader makes the mistake of assuming that they're the important one, making it all about them, not all about us. A bad leader doesn't know how to lead follow, and get out of the way. Probably one of the greatest leaders in all of U.S. history, I would argue, is Dwight D. Eisenhower. He's the Allied commander in charge of the Allies during World War II. But what makes Dwight D. Eisenhower probably one of the greatest commanders in U.S. military history, is that he knew what he was good at, he knew what he was not good at. If you note that this five-star general, the last five-star general we ever had, you know what he did? He didn't actually lead any troops. He led the commanders, he led the generals, but he let Patton be Patton. He let MacArthur be MacArthur. He gave them strategies and ideas and where they should go and got them support, and mostly spent his time keeping them from arguing with each other, if you ever read any of the history books, because he knew that they were better tacticians. But he also knew he was a better manager than any of them. Trust me, if you've ever watched the movie Patton, you did not want to work for that guy. See, what Dwight D. Eisenhower understood is what Jesus is getting at, which is that bad leaders don't know how to get out of the way when someone else knows better and doesn't know how to follow when someone else has the expertise. Bad leaders just want to lead for the sake of leading. I'd go further. I'd say that bad leadership usually involves visions without goals, sayings or slogans without values. That's what he's criticizing the lead Pharisee for. He's saying, guys, you're not being a good leader. What good leaders do is good leaders know when to lead, when to follow, and when to get out of the way. Good leaders have values that are behind any slogan they might use. Good leaders go ahead and have visions with a goal behind it. See, a good leader walks in, and the first thing they do is they try to figure out who knows what. Who is who? What is the values of the community? What is the vision of the community? What are the goals of the community? And then try to figure out, all right, what's my role in this? How can I make this better than what it is? Whether or not it's leading, following, or getting out of the way. Why? Because they approach with humility. They approach knowing they're not going to be the smartest person in the room, especially not on everything. See, that's what good leadership looks like. It's not what the world tells us it looks like. The world wants us to believe that a good leader is super flashy, knows everything, and has an answer to all things. You don't believe me? Just go look at the Fortune 500 CEOs. Good chunk of them, that's how they interact with the world. The good ones, though, know when their vice president knows more. Knows when the person on the front line knows more. And they listen. But that's just leadership. And you could be Christian, not Christian, atheist, whatever, and you could follow those sorts of advice of leadership, right? None of that is exclusively Christian, which is why Jesus goes another level down and says, well, what's the difference between a good Christian leader and a good leader? And the difference is that good Christian leaders are looking out not for themselves, but for the wider community. The goal isn't becoming wealthy or becoming famous or going up the corporate ladder or whatever. That might be the goal over here. You could be a good leader and that's your goal if you're a good leader of a company. But if you're a good Christian leader, your goal is to make the world better. Your goal is to meet those who have needs and minister to them. Your goal is to invite them in and invite them to be part of this community, part of this movement, part of the church. Let me give you an example. So I had a pastor friend, and he served in a very unique community. And these communities exist all over the U.S. They're these little small resort towns, okay? And now his was one of those you go up north for. You all familiar with going up north? Okay? So he lived in this town up north, and basically the town tripled during the summer because he had all these folks who had summer homes up there, and they come out of the big cities, they live in the summer homes. They're usually very wealthy folks. Now that was about maybe half the population of the town. The other half of the population were people who lived there year-round who were townies. Okay? And these townies usually had sort of blue-collar jobs and hard-working folks. Okay? Two very different cultures, right? And so he shows up and he goes to this church, and the church is a nice, thriving little parish sort of in the country, and it's going all right. And they say, well, we really want to grow because we got some budget issues, and we really need more people in the pews, so could you work on that? And he goes, oh, yeah, let me figure out what the community needs. We'll get some programming going. We'll attract some more folks to the church. So he looks out there and he says, oh, well, you know what? You know what the community needs? We got a lot of food insecurity. It's a small, poor town. A lot of jobs have been lost in local factories, stuff like that. You're familiar with these sorts of towns. He says, you know what we're going to do? Every month we're going to have a giant feast. Open to the public, member or not member, we don't care. Just come on in and eat. And we're going to post it up at every grocery store, at every office, at everything we can find. We'll put it on, light poles if they'll let us. Come get some food if you're hungry. No questions asked. So he starts doing this. And it grows and it grows and it grows. And then people are like, this is the most awesome ministry ever. So they start joining the church. They're like, this is great. We're doing what Jesus told us to do. We're feeding people. We're helping people. We're impacting our community. This is awesome. About a year of that goes on. Then his council members come to him and they're like, hey, so, yeah, we need to talk about this community meal thing. And he's like, isn't it awesome? You're like, yeah. But it's created a lot of new members. And he's like, right? That was one of our goals, right? We got new members, they're coming in, church is growing, this is awesome. And they're like, well, yeah. But those new members, they're sort of townies. And we really aren't towny folk. And, we want new members because there's a budget issue. And they're not really rich, so we don't think they're going to solve that for us. They're not our sort of people. They don't go to, the champagne things we do. In that moment, that pastor realized these folks were often great leaders in their companies and their businesses or whatever. They weren't Christian leaders. They wanted something, a social club perhaps. They didn't really want a church. See, that's the difference between leadership and Christian leadership. Christian leadership is always looking outward, always asking the question, what does the community need and how can we help? Not because we think we're going to get anything in return. We're not trying to get a return on the investment. We're not trying to do anything like that. We're helping not because of what we'll get out of it. We help because that's how we live a life like Christ, which is the whole goal of why we're here, to do the best we can at fulfilling that goal, that value. See, that's the difference between Christian leadership and worldly leadership. We don't look for anything. We're not looking for reciprocity. We do it because we're so excited about the grace and the love of God, and we want others to know it too. So as you go out today, take a few minutes in your prayer life and ask yourself, in the ways in which you are a leader, in your family, in your social circles, in your business, in whatever ways you exist, all those different hats you wear. How do you live out that Christian virtue of leadership in those hats? And how are you called to deepen that in the weeks and months ahead? Amen.